Hello, I'm Rob Doyle, and it's my pleasure to share this 38-minute presentation with you on the history of New Hamburg. I have many people to thank, including you, for tuning in. I will list in alphabetical order at the end all those that contributed. We will look at the location and its relationship to surrounding communities. We will follow a rough timeline of historical development, touch on key people, industries, structures, disasters, and compare images to then and now. We will entertain questions of general interest from the chat bar at the end. We will add a website to the Dutchess County Historical Society website with links to 30 resources that I utilized and make it available for free. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this presentation witnessing a unique Hudson Riverfront community with a fantastic history. New Hamburg is a Hudson Riverfront community located at the southern boundary of the town of Poughkeepsie in Dutchess County, New York. This hamlet has been known as Hood Landing, High Point, and Wappingers Landing. Approximately 65 miles north of New York City and 78 miles south of Albany. South of us is Chelsea, which was known as Carthage Landing or Lower Point. Below that, Beacon, which used to be Fishkill Landing, and many other landings all the way down to New York City. West, across the river, Cedar Cliffs and Marlborough. North, Poughkeepsie, other landings all the way to Albany. East is inland, town of Wappinger, big estates, farms, and developed communities. In our pre-European discovery, we take a look at the Wappinger indigenous people. It was a confederacy of Algonquin-speaking Indians in East and North America. Early in the 17th century, the Wappinger lived along the east bank of the Hudson River from Manhattan Island to what is now Poughkeepsie and eastward to the lower Connecticut Valley. The Wappinger Confederacy had a strong presence along the lands of the mouth of the Wappinger Creek. Their totem, or emblem, was the wolf. They held their major tribal ceremonies on the large flat rock peninsula across the Hudson River. When Henry Hudson and his crew first sailed up the river in 1609, they anchored just south of the mouth of the Wappingers Creek and witnessed, according to the log of the Half Moon, and I quote, a large gathering of natives, their bodies painted, singing and chanting while dancing feverishly around a circle of fires. The location of the flat rock was named Danskammer, a Dutch word meaning the Devil's Dance Chamber. Today, it is still known as Danskammer Point. Was it possible that these indigenous people were not devil worshippers, but celebrating in relation to Native American spirituality, cosmology, and ceremonial practices? Perhaps the reason that the land surrounding the creek was the capital of their confederacy was because of the spiritual and cosmological significance of the apparent alignment between these landscape features and the events on the horizon on the longest and shortest days of the year, the winter and summer solstice. The Poughkeepsie Standing Stone on the corner of Oakwood and Delaverne in Wappingers also aligns with the mouth of the creek and Danskammer. An engineer estimates for this ancient stone to be standing in this position, there is at least 17 feet more below the surface. The full article of this will be on the Dutchess County Historical Society website with the other resources. The key to the early development of New Hamburg was the fact that all European settlement along the Hudson River began at the waterfront and moved inland following existing waterways. Dutchess became a county in 1683 by an act of the New York State Legislature, making it one of 12 counties statewide. The Rambout Patent of 1689 granted Francis Rambout and Julian Verplanck all the riverfront land from the mouth of the Fishkill Creek, down where Beacon is, up to the Wappingers Creek, and inland following both creeks all the way back to the Beekman Patent in Dutchess County. The Rambout Patent included lands known today as New Hamburg. Farmer's Landing was built in about 1750. It's a Dutch-style stone house, and it was made for Verplank's station agent. This was part of a wharf complex of Hudson River waterfront structures, including Lent and Waldron's store. Built while New York was still a colony, it was fired upon by cannons from British ships that breached the chain at West Point on their way up the Hudson River to burn the then capital of New York, Kingston. Note, 2 cannonballs have been found on the property and donated to a museum. The 3-foot thick stone walls, were untouched by the cannon fire. In 1798, Nicholas Kruger purchased a stone house and store and assumed oversight of the wharf complex. Dr. Benjamin Eli's 1797 map illustrates the dance chamber on the west shore of the Hudson on the lower left, Jews Creek on the upper west shore. On the east side of the Hudson is the mouth of the Wappingers Creek, and Waldron's Landing, where the 1750s Farmers Landing home still exists today. There are lime kilns on both sides of the Hudson. Here are examples of the lime kilns and how they operated. Liming, or lime burning, was a big industry along the Hudson. The finished product was used as construction mortar and for adding nutrients to the soil as far away as New Jersey at the time. The kilns of the High Point were operated by Ephraim Dubois, who had settled here from Kingston around 1800. Gomez's mill at his homestead on Jews Creek is an important piece for us to take a look at. In 1716, Louise Moses Gomez, a Jewish immigrant from Europe to New York City, purchased 1,200 acres with river access in what is now Marlborough, New York, near the current border with Newburgh. The Gomez family amassed 3,000 acres by 1723. They built a fieldstone blockhouse on what was known as Jews Creek to conduct trade and maintain provisions as an extension of their successful enterprises in colonial New York. Gomez launched one of the Mid-Hudson Valley's earliest commercial ventures, operating mills and lime kilns on the property, then shipping the material to New York City markets. Today, the Gomez homestead with its mill is the oldest Jewish historic site in America. It is open to the public. In 1737, Dutchess County was divided into 7 precincts. Poughkeepsie became a precinct including New Hamburg. The bottom precinct, marked south, became Putnam County. Yes, Putnam County was once part of Dutchess County. This image is of the survey for underwater rights granted to John Drake Jr. on September 21, 1804, as part of his 30-acre deed. This early grant of underwater rights made it possible for the future development of New Hamburg Yacht Club and White's Hudson River Marina. This 1820 survey map of Drake and Bogardus lots is important. Please study this map while I introduce you to John Drake Jr. and his family. John Drake Jr. was born in 1766 and died in 1837. He was an English descent. John Drake's father, Peter Drake, was a loyalist, remaining loyal to the king during the American Revolution. Being on the wrong side of the Revolution, Peter had his lands in Westchester confiscated. He took his family and fled to New Brunswick, Canada in 1783. John, his son, was 17 at the time. He remained in the New York colony as a patriot. John Drake married Cornelia Bogardus. Cornelia was born in Hopewell in the same year as John, 1766. She died in 1830. John and Cornelia married in 1785. They were both 19 years of age. Together, they had 12 children, of which 7 predeceased their parents. In 1808, John Drake Jr. built a wooden drawbridge across the Wappinger Creek on the road to Fishkill, as outlined on the 1820 map. Before that, you needed a boat to come across. By 1810, John Drake had relocated to the hamlet, where he had docks and a store on his 30 acres of land. Samuel Bogardus was born in Hopewell in 1770. He was the younger brother of Cornelia by 4 years. He married Anna Ackerman. They had 7 children. He died in Fishkill in 1840. John Drake and Samuel Bogardus partnered on land acquisitions and business ventures. A union of an English family with a Dutch family provided the primary developmental start to New Hamburg. In 1809, John Drake gave 1 acre of land to the trustees of the Presbyterian Church of the Wappinger Creek. Note the Presbyterian Church is indicated at the top of the mountain in the 1820 map. The view from the top looking south to the mouth of the Wappingers Creek with the railroad bridge crossing the mouth. Danskammer Point is across the river in this photograph, with Chelsea protruding on the east shore downriver and having the Hudson Highlands in the far background. This photo was taken from the Franny Reese bench as part of the Greenway Trail up at the top where the old cemetery is to this day. I discovered this beautiful little headstone in the cemetery. I took a photo of it and added it to the website that has a listing already for Libby, who passed away at 6 days old. While the cemetery records are extensive, very few have images of the headstones to complement the listings. I plan on going up in warmer weather to take more photos to add to the website and would welcome volunteers to join me. In 1824, Charles Millard, who owned a lumber business based in Ulster County, moved to the landing and opened a lumber yard at the end of Point Street. Since most of the lumber and log shipments were made by water, Millard's son, Walter, branched out into shipbuilding and freighting and operated out of New Hamburg. John Drake was instrumental in building the road from Hewsonville to Hopewell to open up a commercial route to bring customers to his business operations in New Hamburg. New Hamburg became a port community on the river with ships loaded and unloaded along nearby Point Street and then taken inland to Poughkeepsie and Wappinger Falls and beyond. During the first quarter of the 19th century, the busy New Hamburg landing eclipsed the wharf complex of Nicholas Kruger's Landing. Kruger's Landing business continued to decline as New Hamburg developed into a busy port. I share with you here an 1833 auction broadside from my collection. It's primarily Samuel Bogardus building lots that are going up for auction along with other additions. Handwritten and signed agreements are attached with 3 wax seals. One transaction example includes, and I quote, "I have this day above bought lot number 2, a corner lot of Division and Water Street, struck for $17 on the above terms, signed Francis Drake." An inflation calculator states that $1 in 1833 would equate to $30.09 today. Therefore, $511.53 would be the calculated 2022 price, accounting for inflation. However, another example includes the auction sale of the 2 bellows and 2 anvils for $40. Today's price would be $1,203.60. What this illustrates to me is that land was cheap and plentiful, while finished manufactured goods were still expensive in 1833. In 1837, Ephraim Dubois sold his property on Water Street, including a lime quarry and kiln, to Adolphus Abram Brower from Ulster County. In the same year, Walter Millard was the postmaster in New Hamburg. In 1844, Brower tore down the Dubois house and built his own new home on the same site. The old lime dock was approximately where the New Hamburg Yacht Club is currently situated. Number 1 Water Street was originally the 1840 residence of Adolf Brower with a view overlooking the New Hamburg Yacht Club. In 1869, the name was the New Hamburg Ice Yacht Club. It is considered the 6th oldest yacht club in the United States. The dues at the time were $3 for active members, those who owned yachts, and $2 for non-active members, those who did not. It was said to be the pioneer ice yacht club in the area. Summer boating wasn't included in its activities until many years later. The ice boats could sail faster than the trains. It was primarily a wealthy man's sport that took place along the Hudson River at all the landings. In 1848, the New York Central Railroad developed along the east shore of the Hudson River, connecting New Hamburg with New York City and stops in between. Commercial development began to reshape the hamlet, a train station was built at the railroad crossing of Main Street, which no longer exists today. The railroad brought new growth and development while cutting off many water outlets along the route, vital to the fishing and boating interests. For a time, while the over 800-foot-long tunnel was being built through the New Hamburg hillside, the hamlet became a busy bottleneck as trains had to be unloaded and ferried around the construction site. The crossing barriers at Main Street were manually lowered and raised by an operator who manned a small structure on the west side of the tracks. It can be partially seen in the next slide. The railroad tunnel was completed in 1851, but for the 2 years of construction, boats from the east side of the Wappingers Creek in the area of Farmers Landing would meet the northbound train at the dock to pick up northbound passengers, to ferry them around and up the river to a waiting train just north of the unfinished tunnel. Therefore, 2 trains were needed at New Hamburg to complete service to Poughkeepsie for 2 years. In the 1850s, the commercial development and center of the hamlet transitions from Point Street to Main Street as a result of the railroad's impact from increased traffic flow of people and freight by rail. The 1820 map shows Point Street before the arrival of the railroad. Point Street was where most business was conducted before the installation of the rail lines. The docks constantly bustled with the movement of people, livestock, produce, and dry goods. And of course, fishing was very big. The lime kilns and quarry were located at Water Street and had their own dock for shipping. Let's take a quick look at some of the structures located on Point Street. Most still exist. A panoramic view showing the point where Millard had his lumber business, cedar cliffs across the river. Note the steeple on the First Presbyterian Church that had been moved down from the mountain onto the lot that once belonged to John Drake. Note there were no structures across the river anymore in the new photo. A close-up view of the Cedar Cliffs community, also known as Hampton, today it is an abandoned quarry. I have hiked all through that area, following the creek up to Gomez Mill Historic Property. The steamboat Mary Powell, the Queen of the Hudson from 1862 to 1917, stopped at New Hamburg twice a day, going north in the morning and heading south later in the day. It was built in 1861 at Allison's Shipyard in Jersey City, New Jersey for a reported $80,000. When not in service, it docked along Rondout Creek in the village of Rondout, later to become part of the city of Kingston. The Powell was the most luxurious and fastest vessel on the Hudson River for 55 years, making daily trips to and from Manhattan for a modest fee. White's Hudson River Marina 2-story brick office building was the same building used as an office by the lumber yard that occupied the Point property before the White's family started in business in 1959. Another former commercial building, once the site of the New Hamburg Hotel, is located across from White's Marina. Note the inlaid brick arch in the stone front. Once a grocery store, now this brick 2-story building is a residence on the corner of Point Street and River. This circa 1870 brick double house built by William Shea is located at 18 Point Street. Bottini Fuel Distribution Center. They have been operating in New Hamburg since 1959. This home, number 2 on the corner of Point Street in Maine, used to be a park in the hamlet, as you can see in the old postcard. Built in the 1930s, this brick firehouse now serves as a residence. However, the all-volunteer, fully equipped New Hamburg Fire District Engine Company No. 1 is headquartered nearby on Channingville Road in Wappinger Falls. The home next to the firehouse was a Sears and Roebuck kit home that arrived by train in a freight car in 1928 to be assembled on a foundation in its current location. It appears that the home may have been the Argyle model, which according to the advertising is already cut and fitted for just $2,349. St. Nicholas on the Hudson Church was formerly the Zion Memorial Chapel. The church was built in 1902. It has regular Sunday services. The stained glass windows were made by David Maitland Armstrong, who was born in 1836 and died in 1918. He grew up in his family homestead on Danskamer Point. He was a gifted artist. Armstrong painted landscapes and was a student of Louis Comfort Tiffany, where he learned to make stained glass windows. The home that David Armstrong grew up in, at some point, it was actually dismantled. The large columns were donated to the Storm King Arts Center and are on view there today. Next, we have one of the three churches in New Hamburg. This circa 1850 once Methodist church serves as a single-family residence today. It still has its original bell dated 1889 in the tower. Before looking at some of the Main Street, let's witness this 1867 map, which shows the railroad tracks and tunnel and the development that has progressed. Note the island in the Hudson is now owned by S. Drake. An earlier map had the name as Oakley's Island. The Presbyterian church that was up on the hill with the cemetery is now in the hamlet on a former Drake property. I do not know when it was moved down. There are references of it being built in 1845. This could be the date it was moved into the hamlet, but more research is needed. During the 1860s, the population was approximately 330 residents. On the corner of Point Street is number 4 Main Street, which was built by William Shea around 1865. Shea's ornate brick warehouse was originally for the distribution of cloth scraps from the Wappinger mills to supply manufacturers in the paper business. The brick warehouse building no longer stands on the property. A view looking north on Point Street at the intersection of Main Street, the two wood-framed homes on either side of the intersection are number 3 Main on the left and number 5 Main on the right. Here are two historic 19th century Main Street homes. On the left is number 13 Main. It is known as the Conklin Bishop House, built about 1850. On the right side is number 9 Main Street, the John Lawson House, dating to about 1844. 10 Main Street is a wood frame structure that was built around 1870 and was known as the Myers General Store. Right next door at 12 Main Street, this wood frame building was built around 1870 and served as the post office. Like many of the period properties in New Hamburg, this one is being renovated, and I look forward to seeing the finished product. Today, the post office for New Hamburg is up in Houstonville. Next, we have 15 Main Street. In 1867, this converted carriage house became the Central Hotel. The main floor was a tavern with rooms above for guests. It advertised, and I quote, "meals at all hours, oysters in every style, boarded by the day or week, and boats to let for reef fishing." Reef fishing is still popular today and refers to Diamond Reef, not far from the New Hamburg shoreline. It has also been called Lime Dock Reef. At low tide, it can be a challenge for large vessels that venture outside the marked channel, as we shall witness in a few minutes. At some point, the first Presbyterian church was moved from the top of the hill, where the original 18th, 19th century cemetery still is, and down into the hamlet. I understand that the church went into private ownership in the 1930s. Today, it is a 5-family residence. A comparison of Main Street looking west. Note the Presbyterian church steeple in the postcard image, and in the contemporary image, note the pedestrian tunnel leading train passengers under the tracks to board the southbound train from the platform on the other side of the tracks. The Eagle Hotel building on the east side of the tracks on Main Street as compared to a contemporary image of the same building. This beautiful single-family residence once housed the Millard family, who were the owners of the lumber yard where White's Marina is now on Lower Point Street. This large home was built around 1870. At one time, there were multiple tracks in New Hamburg, with side rails to handle the tremendous amount of commercial freight that came in and out, primarily from the large factories in the town of Wappinger and commercial enterprises of the village of Wappingers Falls. Sloops and schooners sailed the 14 reaches from New York City to Albany for over 250 years. Early sailors named the reaches based on straight stretches where limited adjustments to maintaining the sails took place. New Hamburg was known as the start of the longest reach. Wappingers Creek, all the way up to Crum Elbow and Hyde Park, was the longest reach. Sloops carried produce, dry goods, livestock, and people up and down the river. Passengers often carried their own bedding and food for the longer trips. Livestock was typically strapped to the mast. A sloop captain's reputation had to be impeccable as he handled substantial financial affairs for his customers. It was not uncommon for a sloop captain to negotiate the market prices of the cargo he was carrying, collect the proceeds, and bring the money back to his clients. He also had to successfully navigate the Hudson River in all weather conditions and tidal conditions without the aid of sophisticated navigation tools. Between 1860 and 1873, various boat captains operated 7 schooners and 23 sloops from New Hamburg, including an African-American captain named Clinton Williams. Clint and his 2 brothers sailed the Hudson River on a slip named the Little Martha from New Hamburg. The inset image shows the actual Little Martha sloop. 14 of the remaining 29 New Hamburg vessels were owned by Drake family members. In February of 1871, New Hamburg witnessed what the newspapers titled the Human Holocaust on the Hudson. It was a horrific railroad accident on the railroad drawbridge over the Wappingers Creek along the Hudson River. A passenger train traveling north collided with a disabled oil tank train heading south. The trains exploded upon impact, instantly throwing people, luggage, and train parts into the water. 77 people were missing or unidentified. The number of confirmed deaths was 23, including the engineer, Doc Simmons. Some bodies were taken to Poughkeepsie for identification. Many were never recovered. Doc Simmons was hailed as a hero, as he stayed with the train, braking all the way to his death when the engine plunged into the icy Hudson upon impact. A signalman from the coal train had run down the tracks toward the oncoming passenger train, waving his lantern. Simmons immediately applied the brakes, significantly slowing the train in the remaining time before impact. It is believed that many more passengers would have perished if he had chose to abandon his post. By the 1870s, New Hamburg was developing and expanding to the north and east, as witnessed in this old view of Conklin Street and Crow Hill, with the 1875 schoolhouse on the top of the hill. 1875 school on Crow Hill replaced the one-room schoolhouse on the main road toward Poughkeepsie, and it's the first shown on an 1876 map. At the time of its construction, it was the only free school in the town of Poughkeepsie with its own local school board. A vintage class picture taken here in front of the free school on Crow Hill. I just love to take a close look at all of the children and the teachers that are in the picture. Their dress, the way their clothing is, the facial expressions, just a fantastic moment captured in time. Here is a view in 1893 of a Queen Anne-style home at 15 Conklin with the 1875 free school on the top of the hill. In 1875, Seth Green, a fish culturist, artificially propagated sturgeon with eggs at the mouth of the Wappingers Creek. Seth was solely responsible for introducing eastern shad to the waters of California, and this is in 1875. He also started the first trout fish farm in New York. In 1987, the Fish Culture Hall of Fame, an institution of the American Fisheries Society, enshrined Seth Green as the father of fish culture in North America. Fishing has always been an important part of New Hamburg. Shad, herring, bass, stripers are a few of the species fished for in the Hudson and its tributaries. The large prehistoric sturgeon, once known as Albany beef, were overfished in the 19th and early 20th century. Their numbers are slowly now coming back. In 1877, the Hamlet suffered a devastating fire. It was May 3rd. It involved the loss of 7 buildings. In 1879, an iron swing bridge was erected and continued to be known as Drake's Bridge. New Hamburg has seen its share of train crashes, and this image actually shows a crash that happened in 1899. But accidents and tragedies were not just confined to the railroad tracks or to fires. On March 27, 1882, with 90 people on board, the Thomas Cornell steamer heading south in thick fog from Marlborough crashed into Danskammer Point. Second pilot Schultes shouted, "Heave, heave," and he rang to stop. At that instant, the Thomas Cornell ran right up on Danskammer Point. The tolling of the Cornell's bell attracted the attention of the passing steamer John L. Hasbrouck. This was the Poughkeepsie to New York night boat. The Hasbrouck took aboard most of the passengers and part of the crew. At Newburgh, the crew members and 30 passengers who had had enough steamboating for one night went ashore and spent the night. The remaining passengers continued on to New York. In this next slide, this is a portrait painting of the John L. Hasbrouck done by the Bard brothers in 1864 when it was first built. On March 4, 1896, the Hasbrouck, bound from Poughkeepsie to New York, was crowded on a reef above the landing at New Hamburg by ice, and it sunk. Later, the Hasbrouck was renamed Marlborough in 1900, and then the vessel was broken up in 1917. Not all vessels ended up on Diamond Reef or Danskammer. Here, Captain Drake's Petrel is transporting people up the Wappingers Creek. He ran regular trips to bring workers from Marlborough and other locations to work at the Wappinger factories. He also did sightseeing excursions. Note that the early railroad bridge across the mouth of the Wappinger Creek opened to allow boat traffic. The current bridge does not open. Today, kayakers and bass fishermen slip under the bridge in low tide. Here are two rare images of World War I soldiers disembarking at New Hamburg for training at Camp Whitman in Fishkill Plains, a national training camp. In 1928, it was a significant year. The railroad enlarged its right-of-way, eliminating Main Street crossing and constructing a new bridge slightly to the north. The resulting road, Bridge Street, bypassed the district area, effectively isolating the small mixed-use enclave from traffic patterns and architectural association with other streets. Further, the construction expanded the main line to the 4 tracks and closed it off. The houses fronting Main Street on the west end were moved backwards, and thus was created the survival remnant of this residential commercial block. No longer the track crossing through a street, Main Street became an isolated side road central to the community only because of the remaining general store. The Stone Street neighborhood changed significantly as well. The New York Central acquired the homes on the east side of the street and demolished them, opening up the space in front of the homes on the west. When and why was the H at the end of Hamburg dropped? The answer is found in the U.S. Postal Service General. United States Board on Geographic Names in 1933, the board issued 22 principles relating to geographic names in the United States. The principle that directly applied was number 8, and I will quote, it simply states, drop the H in Berg. I don't know how Newburgh got to keep their H, but New Hamburg lost theirs. From 1910 to 1969, a group of 20 women who called themselves the 20th Century Club of New Hamburg met once a month. The meeting would go like this: roll call with an inspirational quote, business, a lecture, a sketch, and a unique anecdote or story. Note that the publications in this image have different spellings for the different years. The first one on the left is before 1933 and still has the H. In 1962, the New Hamburg Railroad Station closed due to a tragic pedestrian accident. Several people were killed walking on the tracks by a New York Central B-liner. The train station reopened 19 years later in 1981. Today, Metro North boasts very reliable service to and from New Hamburg. It has 2 tracks and platforms. The southbound train service to Grand Central Station takes about 90 minutes. It takes approximately 16 minutes to arrive in Poughkeepsie to the north from New Hamburg. In 1987, the Main Street Historic District was listed on the National Register of Historic Places. So where are we today? Let's look at a few more quick slides as I wrap up. New Hamburg still witnesses plenty of Hudson River commercial vessel traffic. There are Hudson River boat tours of all sizes operating on the river. Canoeing is now kayaking. Fishing from a boat is still alive and well. What can you try to catch in the Hudson at New Hamburg? In a 2012 blog, a local resident, Mary Hornbeck, reminisced and shared her experience growing up in New Hamburg. Born in 1947, she chronicled the rich history of New Hamburg. The link to her story will be on the Dutchess County Historical Society website with approximately 30 other resource links. I quote, "New Hamburg has always been one big family, a community of small families all concerned about each other. New Hamburg is the perfect place to live. It has everything for peace of mind, safety, and community spirit. Old and new residents blend very well. Between St. Nicholas Church, the Yacht Club, Firehouse, and White's Marina, everyone has a choice of community, kindness, and neighborly friendship." A special thanks goes out to Anita and Don White and the multi-generational family of Whites who sponsored this program and is this month's Dutchess County Historical Society monthly sponsor. I am pleased to have had a boat at White's Marina for the past 15 years and cherish our friendship. A resource list of links will be on the website of the Dutchess County Historical Society to complement this presentation. Please access it for free to learn more. I will be pleased to answer any questions pertaining to my presentation that would be of general interest to all the participants. Please type your questions into the chat bar and we will proceed. Thanks again for joining us. Have fun.